But okay. Hello, everyone. This is our next speaker, Ava, former officer, and give it up for Ava.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to my talk. I'm going to be talking about the indie dev scene and what it's like to be indie. A little bit about myself. My name is Ava Pek. I'm also known as Exodrifter online. And let me give you a brief history of me, the things that I work on, and what my history is like. In 2015, I graduated UT Austin, which means I was last president of EGADS about 9 or 10 years ago, which is a really long time. Clubs changed a lot, but also has changed very little. It's very interesting. It's great. I love EGADS. I've always had a place in my heart for it. When I graduated, I went and did VR dev at Kadak Moon Studios in Florida Censure. No, they're not game studios. I did not work on games when I worked there. I did more like data sciences and ArcViz when I was over there. In 2017, I decided to quit my job and try doing the indie thing, as indie as you can get, just by myself, making my game all on my own. That didn't work out, and I went back to work in 2018. I worked at a company called Flipstone Technology Partners, and I wrote logistics applications in Haskell, which is a fun little programming language that you might have heard about, or maybe never. It's a very rare language to see in the industry. And then just last year, I decided to go indie again. So now I'm doing all the indie stuff again full time, which is really exciting. These are the tools that I typically use, which are really, I think, weird tools when you try thinking about going into the games industry. I use Godot, I use FL Studio, I also use Rust and Haskell when I can. Here are some of the games that I worked on when I was in college. Actually, the one in the middle with the naked guy running around, that was a capstone course game. That was fun. I also made a game called Port of Call. That was one of the games I worked on also in the capstone course. This game actually, we submitted to an E3 student game competition, and we got to bring that game to E3 and show it off to a bunch of people, which was a lot of fun. Again, you might have heard this in previous presentations, but there are really great opportunities and resources here at UT that you can take advantage of to do these kinds of things. I haven't been back to E3 ever since, so it was a really unique opportunity. And E3 doesn't exist anymore, so. I also worked on an narrative game called Gender Dysphoria, which was about my own personal experiences with being transgender and coming out. That game actually has a physical copy now. So you can go online and buy the game in a USB stick in a cassette case. It's part of what's called the Tape Club. We'll talk more about that later. It's really interesting. And I'm currently working on a game called No Signal, which is about investigating some mysterious signals from a black hole. And it's a really like introspective game about loneliness and isolation. And a lot of my games that I tend to make tend to be really narrative focused and try to form like a deep emotional connection with the player. That's sort of what I'm trying to do with this game that I'm working on right now. So this presentation is sort of split up into two different sections. First, I'm going to talk about my experience. Then I'm going to talk about a bunch of random resources that you could use if you're trying to do the independent thing. My experience is very unique to me. And when you talk to a lot of people who are indie, like the Refresh team earlier, everyone has really different experiences when it comes to indie dev. And everyone gets into indie dev for lots of different reasons. But at least this will give you like an idea of what it's like if you want to try doing what is essentially like solo dev, where you sort of try to make a game on your own without really much support. You might be thinking that there are a lot of great reasons to be indie. You might have heard about the 16,000 layoffs that happened in the gaming industry recently. Here's a nice little chart from PC Gamer, where every single dot here is a person in the gaming industry that got laid off. 16,000 people got laid off in the last year, and 5,000 of those were in the last month alone, which has made a lot of people really worried. And you might think, forget the gaming industry, I'll just go and do games on my own. And there's two different ways to do that. But sort of like the dangers that you're trying to avoid when you do this is you're trying to avoid poor working conditions like discrimination or harassment. You might want to avoid crunch. You might get paid less, especially if you're a software developer. You can earn a lot more in the software development industry. Especially if you work at AAA game companies, you might not get to work on what you'd be interested in working on. I've heard plenty of stories from people who are like, yeah, I worked on like Barbie games for 5 years or something like that. Like people just work on whatever puts food on the table, and you have to be okay with that. You have to be a professional. And you also get less choice due to competition, because there's so many people competing for the roles that you're looking for that it can be really difficult to get a foot in the door. On the other hand, if you are independent, you have a lot of control over things that are really nice. Like, for example, you might be able to find a workplace that you like. You can retain a lot of creative control over the things that you want to make. And you're probably doing it because you want to find like a really nice union of all the things that you desire while still being able to provide a comfortable standard of living for yourself. And you might think that this is easy. Certainly when I first started off doing it, I was like, there's like software development. I just like need to write a bunch of code. I need to make a bunch of assets. I know how to do all those things. I also know how to make music. I can do everything if I wanted to. But it's a lot more complicated than that to make a game. We had a couple of talks earlier today about this too, but there's also like marketing, social media. You have to spend time to make updates on Patreon. Those updates don't write themselves. You need to bring your game out to events. That takes up time. You need to, if you want to try doing the streaming thing, which I do, you have to stream on Twitch. And if you're streaming on Twitch, working in your game, people are going to try to distract you by asking you questions, which is fun, but it also impedes your ability to be productive. You also have project management. If you want to work with people, you have to negotiate contracts. You need to process QA reports. You have to integrate with storefronts, which is a lot of work. You have to create a lot of different assets to do all those things, and it can be a lot. There's a lot of things that you have to do, and you don't really have like a ton of time to do everything. So here's how like the time expenditure kind of works out if you're an independent, right? So the first option you have is you can be doing indie game development in a part-time capacity, right? So the idea here is that you have a full-time job, right? Like I'm a software developer, so I'll just go work in the games industry, find a cushy job that makes maybe too much money, and then I can just go to work, and then in my free time I can work on the game that I want to make. This is sort of how your time gets broken up, right? You have like 9 hours for sleep. I don't know how long y'all sleep, but that's how much I need. You work for 8 hours, and then you have about 4 hours of free time every day to work on the thing that you want to do. And you have about like 3 hours that you spend on like eating lunch, dinner, context switching, driving to work, coming back, things like that. And 4 hours a day is not a whole lot. You might say, oh, well, I have weekends, but that's also only really like 2 days a week. And you have a lot of other things that you need to do where you need to like think about your own mental health and like not burning out and not working too much. On the flip side, if you're full-time, your schedule looks like this, right? It looks more or less the same, except now you get to work on your game 8 hours a day, and then you have 4 hours of free time, and you can go back to like having a quote-unquote normal life. But this isn't really how it works when you're full-time, because when you're full-time doing indie dev, you're not making any money anymore. So your schedule looks more like this, where you think you have to spend all of your time working on the game, and that can be really hard to balance the sort of pressure that you feel when you're working on something, because you know that you have to make money somehow in order to keep this thing going. So that's something you need to keep in mind when you decide whether or not you're going to do it part-time or full-time. So I spend most of my time streaming. I have like a bunch of VODs, and I stream on Twitch 4 days a week. It's interesting. They're not a lot of people doing independent game streaming, but there are quite a few people doing it, it's a lot of fun to see what other people are doing and have people drop by and watch. I guess people enjoy watching people make games. That's a thing that happens. I also run a Discord, and I run a co-host where I post things about the game that I'm working on. But those are sort of like the only social media platforms I am on. I don't use like Twitter or Instagram or things like that. Partially because I don't really understand how those platforms work, and also because it would be a lot of time to figure out what I would do on those platforms. Like I can't like be on every platform constantly, right? So I try to focus on just a couple of platforms to focus my energy and try to leverage them to the best of my ability. And in the end, there's just a whole lot to do. There's a lot of marketing stuff that really overwhelms even me sometimes. So Yeah. This is sort of what the development processes look like for my current game. I started working on my game in December, which was only about a little over 2 months ago. The first thing that we wanted to do was figure out a really nice way to like do the art for the game in a way that wouldn't take up too much of our time. So we wanted a way that would allow us to iterate really quickly on the art. So you can see here, this scene looks like crap because it doesn't really have any nice colors assigned to it, and it mostly just looks like it's pink, red, gray, and there's some yellow in there. But what's important about the way this is set up is that every single like color on a mesh is sort of like a color slot where we can like assign a color for that thing to be. You can sort of think of it as a coloring book. So this is what it looks like after we assign colors to every single material slot. And what's nice about our approach is that we can change the colors of the things that we want inside of the engine. I don't have to go back to the artist and say, okay, you need to go back and like update the texture or update the UV unwrap or things like that. We just assign a color for that part of the mesh. And then we can add decals to make it look more interesting so that everything isn't textured exactly the same. And then we can add some lights and then fiddle around with the environment effects to make this scene look nice. So as an indie, when you're working independently by yourself, you want to make sure that you find ways that allow you to do a lot with very little. You want to build out tools that really like multiply the ability of yourself to be productive. And one of those things is actually burning the prototype. So burning your prototype is really important because if you try to stay with the thing that you've been working on the entire time that you're working on it, you'll end up with a lot of tech debt that you have to accommodate. And so when you burn the prototype, what essentially happens is you get a fresh new slate to do everything else. And that can really speed up development in the long run. Because now that you understand the problem space after working on it for a little bit, you can really think of better ways of designing systems to support all the things that you want to do. And so I have a little demo actually of what the game looks like now. I have to open Godot.
Godot 4, please.
Yeah, it's Godot 4. Yeah. Okay, so here's what the game looks like now. It's very exciting, I promise. So here's one of the scenes where we have this like library with a lot of books in it. And it's a hidden object game, so we have things like drives that are hidden that you can find. And it's a narrative focused game, so you can bring those drives over here to put them in drive slots. I actually have some drives here that I already set up. And we have like this dialogue system where you can read what people are saying. But I just really want to show off one specific part that I'm really proud of that I think is cool. Oh no, I went too far. Okay, so at the end of this dialogue, Yuri mentions that there's so many different keys that they sort of lose track of them, so they just stick the cards under rugs and things like that. And this is a hidden object game, so you might think, okay, well, I want to go figure out like where all the hidden objects are. And if we go downstairs, which is over here, we might want to access this part of the station by using this card, but it doesn't work because the card doesn't have the correct permissions on it. So if you remember the dialogue from earlier, there's a rug here, and if we actually look underneath it, there's a card hidden here, which is really fun. And you can use that to access the rest of the station. So that's sort of like what my game looks like right now. And like, I just wanted to show you that like, even if you delete your prototype, you can build up really quickly back up to the point where you've got like a really fleshed out game system to play around with. So that's sort of what the game looks like right now. Oh no, it's not in slideshow mode anymore. Okay. But development is hard. There's still a lot of things that I have to worry about when I try releasing the game later in the future. There's a lot of things that could go wrong potentially, but hopefully it'll be okay. I don't know. Does anyone have any questions so far? I'll just wiggle. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the first time that I tried doing independent stuff, I actually quit my job because I was super depressed. And that situation doesn't solve itself when you quit your job. Originally, I thought that when I quit my job, that the main source of stress for me would go away, right? That my job, which was burning me out, would no longer be burning me out, and then I could like be in a better emotional place to make whatever I wanted. Unfortunately, I didn't know myself very well back then, and what ended up happening was I burnt myself out on my own game, and I was still really depressed most of that time. Um, I actually, the game that I burnt out on, I never released, but during that time, I actually made the other game that I mentioned earlier, Gender Dysphoria, where I did a game jam for myself for like 72 hours, and I just sort of like threw it out into the wild, even though it was a unfinished, incomplete game, in my opinion, from like my own evaluation, right? But a lot of people seem to really like that game. And so I just kept working on that after, even after I went back to work, I would keep working on Gender Dysphoria and making it better. I added voice acting. I fixed a lot of bugs. I got it on Steam. I did a lot of things to that game, actually, while I was working. And one of the things I realized when I was working after my first stint as an indie is that uh, I sort of had things in the wrong order. I needed to understand myself better as a person in order to figure out how I could leverage my own talents and abilities to make something that I could sell. And back then I didn't really understand myself that well. And I also like didn't really do a whole lot of marketing. One of the things I was really worried about when I was working on my games is that I didn't want to give out any spoilers for my game because like I make narrative focused games, right? Like the entire point of playing my games is to figure out what happens in the story. So you might think that, hey, well, I'm not going to go online and like stream game development and tell everyone how my story ends because then they won't play it, right? But as it turns out, if you don't worry about spoilers and you just tell people about what you're making, and you try to get them excited about it, then people will hear about your game, they'll know it exists. And I just when I did the indie thing the first time, I was really bad at marketing in that sense, where I like didn't show anyone my game, didn't talk to anyone about my game, I didn't market it at all. I was worried about spoilers of all things, right? So that was one of the things that went really poorly in my first attempt. Any other questions? Yeah.
You said you had experience with contracts with the right?
Yeah, that's right.
How's that? How is that experience?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that for gender dysphoria, I got voice acting done for it. I don't know how voice acting works, and I don't know how the voice acting world works in general. So apparently, I can give you sort of like the rundown of how it operates. Is that you do what's called a casting call, and you go out and you basically put out like, hey, this is like the thing that I'm doing. Here are what the roles are. Here's how many words I need. That kind of thing. This is what the story is about, and you have people apply. They maybe do some sample lines, and you decide whether or not you want to work with them. But whenever you want to work with someone, you have to sign a contract with them detailing how exactly you can use the audio that they're going to produce for you, how much you're going to pay them for it, and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of like, even like the people I worked with had their own ideas of what kind of like legal copy that was acceptable for the work that they were doing. So if you don't know a whole lot, they usually know. But there's also you can find templates online about like how to sign contract or how to like write contracts for these kinds of pieces of work that you want to get done. I do a similar thing where I like commission music, and same thing happens where I'll have like a written contract with someone that states how and when they can use my music and how much they'll pay me for it and that kind of thing. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anything else? We're going to go into resources next. I'm just going to bombard you with lots of resources. It'll be fun. Okay. So here's a bunch of marketing resources that you may or may not use. So the first thing you might want to consider is you want to submit to competitions. You might not necessarily want to get into the biggest ones, but at least as an indie, these are the ones that are the most interesting. There's IndieCade, there's IGF, and there's also Steam Next Fest. All of these are really important for getting your game out there to people you might not otherwise meet. Unfortunately, IGF and IndieCade both suffer from the problem that they have trouble acquiring judges to rate all the games. So it can be a little difficult to get your game in through these channels, but they're still really important. There's also local events. So we talked about some of these earlier. There's Austin Game Dev Beer Night, which happens at the Brutorium, where you can go and network with other people that you might want to work with. You can also show off your game at Games Y'all, and there's a meetup that meets every other month called Austin Glitch State, where you can have your game play tested. My game will actually be at the next meetup if you want to come play it. And I also need to get my game ready in time for that. You can get your games into bundles. So some of these are 2 bundles that I've been a part of. The first one is Indie Apocalypse. Indie Apocalypse is a zine where you have like 10 games made by smaller creators, and you get a commission and a royalty cut out of that. It comes out every month. And then there's Queer Games Bundle that happens every year, where it's just like a bunch of games made by people who are part of the queer community. But there's all sorts of bundles out there that you can find that you can bundle your game with. Actually, I think this was mentioned in the other marketing talk, but like working with other game developers to see if you can like package your games together can be a really powerful move to get more people to take notice of your game. There's also local conventions. So these are all conventions that happen right here in Austin. You don't need they're great because you don't need to buy an airplane ticket. You don't need to like buy a hotel. You can just like get out of your house and then go to these. These are right here in Austin. Staple happens at I think St. Edward's. It's in April, I believe. There's Classic Games Fest, which also happens, I think, in the summer, which I haven't been to yet, actually. I'm really interested in that one. And then there's Fantastic Arcade, but I put a question mark next to that one because they haven't done an event for a few years, so I'm not sure if that thing is still going. There are also other conventions that you can try going to. One that might not be super obvious is that anime conventions are actually super great for indie devs. Anime conventions almost always have an indie game showcase somewhere as part of their convention. San Japan has one. And if you bring your game out to those events, you can meet a lot of people who are interested in playing games. And then there's, of course, the bigger ones like PAX and MagFest that you could try going to. And there's all sorts of different marketing opportunities that you could be a part of too. Like I'm making my game in Godot, and every December there's a Godot showreel where they show off all of the games that are made with Godot, which is a great opportunity to get exposure. You can also work with indie game streamers, and you can also make relationships with people who are in the press to like write about your game and tell everyone about it. But yeah, marketing is hard. Does anyone have questions about marketing resources? I like Nishija. This is what it's from. The first 2 panels are the guy, he's wearing a lion mask instead, and the manager's like, "Hey, can you wear this egg instead?" What's up? Yeah, it seems like a really cool event. I think the tables aren't even that expensive. Like for a small one, it costs like, I think, well, they don't have the cheapest prices anymore, but somewhere between like $200, $300. Yeah, that sounds about right. Like 250. Yeah. But yeah, there's lots of great opportunities at the local level to sort of show your game off. You don't have to go to GDC or PAX or MagFest or things like that. There's all sorts of local opportunities to show off your game. There's lots of different ways to fund your indie game as well. The first one is that you can find a grant. Unfortunately, the grants here in Texas are not particularly good, especially if you like look at Quebec or Montreal and you salivate over their grant programs that they have over there. The Texas Film Commission only works if you have at least $100,000 to spend. I don't know about you, but I don't have that much money. There's also the Indie Fund, which you can apply for online. It's basically a bunch of people who have made it being indie, sort of investing in other people who also want to be indie and like giving out loans that are no risk, 0 interest loans or something like that. And the Museum of Human Achievement, which runs Games Y'all, also does, well, they used to do grants. but they'll still help you apply to grants so that you can get money and funding for your game. So if you want to get some help looking for grants, they will be interested in helping you out. You can also work with publishers. As an indie, the ones that are the most interesting to me are I don't know how to pronounce that games and Devolver Digital. I don't know. Do y'all know about Valhalla Cyberpunk or Cyberpunk Bartending Action? They're the ones who published that, the first one. They're cool. Their website is a vibe. You can also try self-funding. So if you work part-time, you can work a 9 to 5 and save up money for your indie game dreams. You can also do freelancing. And there's also a really cool website called workwithindies.com where you can go and try to find other people who are looking to contract people for the indie games that they're working on. And you can also, if you have the social credit, ask friends and family for money too, although that's not a route that I like to do personally. Money is also a very difficult part of the indie life. Anyone have questions about money? Too many? I have like a buck. What's up? Yeah, so the question is, how much would you spend on marketing compared to everything else? Is that right?
Yeah, or how would you divide your budget, or how have you divided your budget in the past 6 months?
Yeah, so the way I divide the budget in my head, it's really weird because as an indie, you don't really pay anyone. Like I don't have a salary, you know? So when I think about the expenditure that it requires, I normally think of it in terms of time and energy, right? So like I can do a lot of things, but I only have so much time available to me every year that I can like get useful work out of myself, right? So the way I think about it normally is that there's this common adage when you do game development that 50% of your budget is marketing. So that's what I do approximately 50% of my time is marketing, like writing blog posts, telling other people about my game, trying to advertise it on other places. The game that I'm working on right now, actually, I planned it to only take 6 months to make, and the first 3 months of development are almost over. And after that, I'm planning on primarily focusing on doing marketing after that. So right now I spend maybe about like 80-90% of my time doing development. But after that, I'm going to be spending 80 or 90% of my time on marketing instead. Marketing is really expensive because if no one knows about your game, then no one's going to buy it. And it can take up a lot of your time. You have to like really spend a lot of time telling other people about your game. So that's sort of how it splits, is like roughly 50%. Any other questions? All right. The last thing I want to talk about is the different platforms that you can go on. Some of them are obvious, but I'll talk about the pros and cons of each one. The first one is itch.io. Itch.io has an extremely low barrier of entry. The barrier of entry is so low, in fact, that you can publish just about anything on itch.io as long as it's legal. You can you can sell things like music, TTRPG books. I've seen all sorts of things on itch.io. Itch.io also, strangely enough, has really good organic growth. There are people still finding the gender dysphoria game that I made like years ago that find it naturally just by like browsing the website. I don't really even have to worry too much about like how highly I place on it. Somehow people still continue to find my game just by browsing itch.io. Unfortunately, itch.io doesn't have any localization, which is a problem if you want to start attracting a larger demographic of people to play your games. If you want to translate your game into a different language, you can't do that with your store page. So whenever you have a game on itch.io and you want to update all the text to be in Spanish for people who only know Spanish, you have to create an entirely new game in order to localize it. There's also no price localization. Itch.io doesn't have any tools for doing that. And generally, if you run into any problems with itch, it can take them a very long time to respond to support. I hang out on the itch.io Discord channel, and usually it seems like the lead times on support emails is something like 6 weeks. Like it's a really long time sometimes. Although you can sometimes get it to happen faster if you pro tip, if you go on the server and then you ping Leaf, who is the admin of the website, like the person who started itch.io, sometimes that'll make it happen faster. I don't know why they allow that to happen. But they still do it for some reason. There's Steam, which is obviously the, I think to everyone, the biggest digital platform that's out there. They do have price localization, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, discoverability on Steam is pretty low. Most people don't bother searching for games really all that much on Steam. And lastly, like this might be a pro or a con depending on how you look at it, but everyone expects your game to be on Steam. The moment you like open your mouth and start talking about your game, the first thing they're going to ask is like, is there a Steam page? Can I wishlist it? Like, so when you're an indie, you'll get asked about Steam a lot because it is the biggest platform out there. There are also other platforms that you can release your game on. There's Good Old Games, which is an interesting site to try to get your game on because they actually do curation. So you have to actually fill out a form and pitch your game to them, and then they'll decide whether or not they want to allow it on the platform. Fun fact, Gender Dysphoria as a text-only visual novel game was not game enough to be in their library, so they actually rejected my application. And then there's Game Jolt, which is another storefront where people mostly post demos. And I've only heard this anecdotally, but apparently posting demos there can get a lot of traction. So that's another platform you can release your games on. And there's all sorts of alternate platforms where you can publish your things, and these are just some of them. But that's basically my presentation, and we can just do questions now. Yeah. Thanks for my talk, listening to my talk.
We're going to bring up the reviewer on Steam.
Oh, you want me to clown on reviewers?
Sorry, did you say that Bill Games said that it was in game?
GAME. Well, they didn't say that exactly, but they basically said that it doesn't fit in their storefront, and I just assumed what they meant. So yeah, this is the game that I have out on Steam right now. Let me see if I can find the negative. Oh, here we go. Negative. All right. Where is it? Oh, it's this one. Okay. Let's read this one together. This is a good way to educate people who have absolutely no idea what a gender transition feels like. This is a huge problem, though. People who would actually benefit from playing this game will never play it. It's a 20-minute, not really branching text game that costs money and doesn't offer anything in terms of the gameplay. You have to be actively searching for it and willing to know more about gender transition in order to actually get to this page and buy it. Unfortunately, if you fall into this category, then you'll likely learn nothing from it. There are a few exceptions, which explains the positive rating, but I wasn't one of them. It makes absolutely no sense to me that this game isn't free. I don't understand what the point of making it was. It feels like a missed opportunity more than anything else. Oh, right, yeah. The game is actually available for free, for what it's worth. So, yeah. Yeah, maybe play the game for free then. It's fine. It's gonna load slow on the UT network, but yeah. Anyway, that sometimes I get fun reviews like that on my game. They're fun to read. I do like the idea of someone saying that your game doesn't have enough impact because you didn't make it free. It's a funny thing to think about sometimes. I need more. Your game was good, but it wasn't free, so downvote. Yes.
Did you ever work on the game like after your full-time job or did that often happen? I'm just curious about like having to stay motivated on what were the things that kept you bouncing about it.
Yeah, so for gender, so the question is, how did I find the motivation keep working on gender dysphoria during my full-time job, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the motivation was very simple for me. The reason I got into game development wasn't because I like making games. I actually got into game development because I like making things for people. And when I saw that people continue playing my game, I felt really bad. I looked at my game and I'm like, oh, there's like bugs, and there's the dialogue here is like wrong. It's like misspelled. And like what happens if like a person wants to play it but they have vision deficiencies and things like that. And I eventually got into my head like, oh, like I can fix all those problems if I just added like some voice acting to my game, right? Like just hire a bunch of voice actors and then do that. And that was a lot of effort to do. But like the reason I felt motivated to do all those things was because I constantly like I look at like itch.io analytics, and I would see that there were still people playing the game, coming to the itch page and checking it out. And I would continue getting comments all the time. Like I showed you one negative comment on my game, right? But there's like probably like at least 100 like positive ones on my itch.io page alone. And even like personally me interacting with people that sometimes I've never even met, and I talk to them about the kind of effect that my game had on them. It's really a powerful motivator for me to see how my game affects other people and see that they enjoy it and that they want more. And so I wanted to do more for them. Yeah.
Yeah, earlier today, Melly Russ from Gearbox Publishing mentioned how in AAA games usually marketing is scoped in the plan, like whether you have to make built-in tools or anything, like a trailer and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How does that fit into a scope for indie game? Do you make tools or pipelines to make trailers, or is that something that comes after the fact?
Yeah. So that was a really interesting part of the presentation to watch for me. So the question is like, what kinds of tools or pipelines do I need to develop for myself for making marketing materials? And what's actually really fun is that the Godot engine actually has tools built in it to do screenshots and cinematics. You just need to learn the API. So I can show you a quick demo right now. But basically, all you have to do in Godot is you need to go here at project settings, and you need to look for the movie writer output. You stick a path here, right? And then you click this button and you press play. And then you're recording like a butter smooth like cinematic, because it'll update the game in a way where it can like record it as if it were in real time, even though the graphic settings are too much for your computer. So there's a lot of things that Godot engine has already that makes it easier for me. And figuring out like what tools are out there already that I can leverage to do what I want is really important as an indie, because I don't have time to write all the tools that I need to do all of my things. Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Going off the bat, for actually making the video, is that something you go to a third party for, or is that something you do yourself?
No, I make the video myself. I actually really like video editing. It's just painful because I use Linux. So the tooling for making videos on Linux are not very great. There's an application called OpenShot. There's also Kdenlive that you can use. And if you really want to get fancy, you can use DaVinci Resolve on Linux, actually. That's like an industry-leading video editor that you can actually use on Linux. And I use those to make my videos. So actually, for the game that I'm currently working on, I've already released, I think, like 8 devlogs publicly, and I have 2 more in my backlog that I want to release still. But yeah, I do all of that myself. And so like that's another way that doing all of the extra stuff that comes along with making a game can really eat up all of your time as an indie, because like I'm not working on the game when I'm making a video. And you know, like videos can take a really long time to produce. You might imagine in comparison that like you might imagine like an independent music artist or an independent artist or something like that. They can like crank out like an illustration or a really nice piece of art every week or that kind of thing. But like in a game, not only do you need music, art, all of these other things, you also need a whole host of other things that complement your game, like marketing and social media and video editing and stuff like that. Like almost everyone expects you to like have a trailer for your game. Like you can't get on Steam if you don't have a trailer. Well, I mean, you can technically, but everyone's going to expect a trailer for your game. So you need to do a lot of other things. Your skill set needs to be very wide if you want to do everything, but you can't do everything yourself. You need to work with other people sometimes. It just happens that like video editing happens to be like within the skill set that I find easy. There are other things that I depend on. So like, let me turn off movie writer mode. But like all of the assets in this game, I didn't make myself. Oh, this is the actual game. Hold on. You're not supposed to see that. Spoilers, yeah. Yeah, I can spoil my game in a little bit. But like all of these assets that you see in the scene, like I didn't make any of these. I'm actually working with a friend because like I can technically do 3D art in Blender. I'm pretty good at making inorganic things, but I'm not particularly fast and I don't really like it either. And it's really great to have someone that I can work with who can do all of this modeling for me. And that's part of the reason that I'm able to do as much as I am is that when you're like as an indie person, it's very useful to find someone to work with and find a way to leverage each other's strengths to do as much as you can. So even though you do tend to wear a lot of different hats in the indie world, don't try to do everything because it'll be like if I had to do everything myself, like the game wouldn't be in the state that it is right now because I would have to do everything I did up to this point and then also sit down and be like, okay, now I need to make all these 3D models, you know? So, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned freelancing and you mentioned you also like have contracted other people to do like voice acting. I don't know if you've done if you contact for anything else, but when you're kind of looking for other people to hopefully work in your like indie gaming, what do you want from them? Like what do you think to look at what's they can do and
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah, so usually I just want to make sure that we have good vibes, that I like working with them. It's very important to work with someone who you like. If you don't like them, you're going to have to talk to them every day, and I don't like talking to people I don't like. So that's like the most important thing. The other thing is that you want to find people who complement your skill set. So I'm not particularly good at 3D modeling, like I mentioned earlier. So it's really nice to work with someone who knows about all that kind of stuff, and they can like really, I can really leave it to them to leverage their talents to do something great, and like trust them with doing that too. Like I don't have to micromanage. The artist's name is Tanuki. I don't have to micromanage Tanuki to do all of this stuff. I just tell Tanuki generally, you know, what I want to do. And we have like a mutual understanding because we have a good working relationship with each other. And all of this happens and it's great. And every time Tanuki sends me more 3D assets, I'm always blown away at how good everything is. So it's really important to find people that complement the things that you're not very good at and find a way to leverage each other's talents. Everyone's bad at something. So you're going to want to work with someone at some point. It's very hard to, there's sort of like this myth that you can be a solo indie developer. People might point to things like Minecraft or Stardew Valley, games that are sort of notorious for having like a single developer on the team. But in reality, all of those projects eventually had more people work on them. It's very basically impossible to make a game, release it, and have it be successful all on your own. Any other questions? Yeah.
After your first indie experience and then going back to full-time work, what was the thing that pushed you to do it again?
I'm addicted to it. I can't stop myself. I feel deeply unsatisfied if I'm not doing this. Even at my full-time jobs, you know, like when I was like, I've gotten questions before where people ask me like, how do you find the motivation and energy to do a 9 to 5 and then like get on Twitch and then stream for like 4 hours doing game development? And like, I honestly don't know the answer to that question. It's just like, I have like this drive to do something creative and I really want to make things for other people. And that's sort of what that sort of really is what like drives me. But like the advice that I've given before is that the way you can make that work for yourself is that you need to really have like a deep understanding of yourself. Like what drives you? Why do you want to do these things? What am I looking to get out of it? And when you understand those things and you understand like the kinds of things that get in your way or the kinds of things that energize you, you can leverage those things to make yourself more productive and do more of the thing that you like to do. Yeah. You had a question? Yeah, so this one's kind of funny. Tanuki refused to take any money from me. So she's technically working for me for free. But we have this mutual understanding that we would work an agreement out about that in the future, which is not great business advice. I wouldn't do that if I were you. You should definitely have an agreement in writing up front. But we have we're actually quite close friends, so we have social credit that we can spend to do agreements like that. But yeah, I don't recommend it. Don't do that. Please don't do that. That's a really bad idea. If you want an example of how bad that idea is, you can watch Indie Game the movie, and you can marvel at the development process of Fez, where that basically happens to Phil Fish, who did development on the game and had like a business partner who they got into like a disagreement, and then like some legal battle happened and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Public or has it been success rate for having a public friend? Is that hard to get from public?
Yeah, so I actually haven't worked with a publisher other than Indie Apocalypse yet. So Indie Apocalypse is sort of like a much smaller publisher. And I don't really know what it's like to have a larger publisher take you on. I know that is a thing that independents do, and I do know that the process can be quite difficult. You need to be very good at selling your game, for example, especially if you want them to give you funding for a game that you're currently developing and one that's not finished. But as for like how the whole process is and how it feels to go through all of that, I actually don't know because I've never done it before. Yeah. Any other questions?
Be an indie game developer after hearing all this.
Do you have a question? Do you still want to do it? Okay. Well, I can't stop you. Just I can't stop myself. That's how it is, I think. But yeah, do you want to help me fill time, John?
It sounds like this is something that you have anyway. From now, it's just a question of what you spend the rest of your life doing while also
Yeah, that's right. So I want to figure out a way to make it work so I can eat food and have a roof over my head. I like eating food. Food's pretty good. Food's tasty most of the time. I like food a lot. But yeah, that's the main problem is like I have this really deep desire and drive to do these kinds of things, but figuring out how to like make money doing it can be really difficult. Marketing is not like my strongest suit.
How are you doing right? What gallery?
How am I doing indie game development right now?
Like how are you making money?
I don't. I saved up money from my 9-to-5 job. So my runway right now is about 2 years before I have to go back and get another job. And I am technically speaking making money from Twitch and Patreon, but it's only about like enough to feed my cat every month, I think. And
I'm sure the cat appreciates it.
I sure hope so. You know how cats are. They're sort of like indifferent. Yeah. I forgot what the question was already. But yeah, that's part of the reason I actually wanted to make a game in 6 months is because one of the things that I realized last time I was working on a game, the first time I quit my job and I was like, okay, I have like a year before I run out of money. I'm going to try to make a game in a year. And basically what happened is that I only got to roll the dice once, right? Like not everything you're going to make is going to succeed. So I wanted a much faster, I wanted to make games much faster this time and try things out more often and see what works and what doesn't. I want to have the opportunity to fail more and also the opportunity to succeed more. So that's one of the reasons I'm like, even though I have a runway of 2 years, I'm not going to use all of 2 years to make one game and do a single roll and bet it all on one chip, right? Like I'm going to try to roll the dice multiple times, which is why the game is only being made in 6 months. So like 6 months in, I can see how well the game does and say, okay, well, how can I do that but better, right? And then I still have time to figure that out with the runway that I have, and hopefully that'll help me figure out how to succeed. Yeah.
After the first try at going full time in indie and going back to work, did you go back to work with the plan to go back to indie later on, or?
Yeah, that's right. So the question is if I went back to work with the plan to go back to go indie again. And the answer is yes. I actually, the employer that I was interviewing with, that I eventually worked for, I actually talked to them very honestly and openly about my desire to go back to indie dev eventually one day. And they accepted that as part of the interview process that I had with them. And my internal plan was, oh yeah, I'll do this for 2 years and then I'll quit and then I'll go do the indie thing for a while and then when I run out of money, I'll like go find another job again. But I actually ended up working there for like 5 or 6 years because I really liked working there. I actually liked the people that I worked with. I was making money, I was saving it up, and I had a pretty good work-life balance where I could like get home and still have energy to keep doing things. So I was satisfied with that arrangement for a while. So I actually did get a job with the full intention to eventually quit and do the indie thing again. But sometimes you find nice jobs and then you want to work there for a while. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Going back to like you were saying, different times weren't always aware, didn't understand yourself that well. I think that's what you put it.
That's right. Yeah.
And not to go to find a point on it, but it seems like one of the things we had to figure out along the way was what makes you happy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how to balance your life around that instead of just doing this thing for often. Well, that's happening with money. Do you remember any particular moments where, you know, obviously that's the kind of thing that you go from nothing to something pretty quickly. You can't really anticipate it happening, but obviously everything that makes one person happy isn't necessarily going to make everyone else happy.
That's right. Yeah.
At what point was it did you realize, okay, I've actually got a balance now of things that I like doing and things that I have to do, which might actually work.
Yeah. So the question is, when did I find the balance to realize that I overcome like a lot of the troubles I had with like depression and anxiety and mental health issues? So that happened very slowly. And an important part of that was seeing a therapist, which was very difficult because it's very hard to find a therapist that you vibe with. But once you find someone that you can work with and you feel comfortable talking to, the changes happen very slowly. But there was eventually a point in my life where I looked at how I was feeling and how I was doing at my current job, doing indie game development on the side and stuff like that. And really realizing that like 3 years ago, I would have had a much more difficult time coping. The changes come in slowly, and the kind of change that where like mental health stops being an issue for you isn't the thing that just like happens overnight. It can take a long time to understand yourself, and at least for me, learning like the skills that I needed to manage my mental health more appropriately was something that took time. Like you're not just going to acquire those overnight. So actually the game that I'm working on right now, Lost Contact, is a game that is about some of that too, because one of the things that I learned when I was in therapy was that I needed to do something that was called cognitive reframing. And that's one of the things that I really want to express in the next game that I'm working on. But cognitive reframing is just like one skill that you can learn to help manage your mental health and be in a healthier place from a mental health standpoint. And there's so many techniques and skills out there that you can learn, as weird as it is to like put it that way, right? That can help you manage your health and be in a better place mentally. Yeah.
While talking about like your 2-year plan,
Mm-hmm.
I started thinking about how I scope my current projects.
Yeah.
Without having like the weight of a very hard deadline, I'm more willing to scope in ideas where I still have to do a lot of learning to get it done.
Yeah.
But when there is a hard timeline and there's maybe a mechanic where you're not sure how long it might take completely because you know how much time in a game.
Yeah. So my generic answer for that, there's lots of different things that you could do to help estimate how long something will take to do if you don't know how to do it already. But the easiest answer to that question is just prototyping. Just like time box yourself. Give yourself like in this particular project for No Signal, I gave myself a week. And I said, in a week, I'm going to try to figure out how to make this game fun and interesting and explore all the different ways I can like do a hidden object game in 3D space, which is not a thing that you see very much out in the market. And by doing that experimentation, you learn a lot about the tools that you are about to use that to make your game. And you understand the problem space a lot better than you used to when you first started. And doing things right on the first try is very, very difficult. But if you do an experiment and you use that information that you gain from doing the experiment to make better plans, you often get a better idea of like how long something will take to make. So yeah, there's also another example for this where I actually was making another Godot game before this one. And I really wanted it to be like an inventory management game. And I really didn't like using GD script. So I tried using stuff like, oh, like maybe I can write the code in Rust, or maybe I can use C# or that kind of thing. And I experimented with that for like about a year. But if only I had like, instead of every single time trying to make a full game using that premise, if I just gave myself some time to prototype, you know, like if I just gave myself like a week and after that week said, oh, can I do this to make the thing in the time that I am going to give myself? I could have made more course corrections earlier on to say, oh, like these tools are not going to be suitable for me at this moment in time. I should try doing something else. So prototyping can be a really useful tool for that kind of thing. I think we have time for one more question. I'm just going to edit. All right. Thanks for the talk, everyone. Wait, that's the other way around. Thanks for listening to my talk.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.